The congressional hearing room fell silent as the senator leaned into his microphone, his suit immaculate and his expression stern. What he said next sparked one of the most intense political clashes of the year. "Representative Carter," he began, his tone laced with condescension, "I question whether someone with your limited tenure should be lecturing seasoned legislators on constitutional law." The 33-year-old Congresswoman from Texas sat composed, her gaze fixed on the senator. What Jasmine Carter produced next left the veteran politician stunned and transformed a routine hearing into a viral moment that dominated headlines for weeks. This wasn't just a policy dispute. It was a collision between entrenched political privilege and the sharp intellect of a woman tired of being underestimated. The senator was about to learn that challenging Jasmine Carter's credentials was a grave miscalculation. To grasp why this moment resonated with millions, it's essential to understand the two figures at its center and why their confrontation mattered. The senator, a 77-year-old from Utah, had spent decades in the upper tiers of American politics. A former governor, presidential nominee, and heir to a wealthy political dynasty, he embodied the old establishment, privileged, affluent, and accustomed to addressing others from a position of assumed superiority. His career rested on the belief that his elite education and connections made him untouchable. Born into wealth, educated at top institutions, and surrounded by powerful networks from birth, he never faced the struggles most Americans endure. His success at a major investment firm came through leveraging inherited resources, not pure merit. In recent years, he'd styled himself as a principled moderate, occasionally critiquing his party's leader, but this image concealed a deeper arrogance about his intellectual superiority. He believed his credentials and experience automatically outranked those of lawmakers with specialized expertise. For months, the senator had grown irritated with the new wave of young Democratic lawmakers who challenged his party's norms. He particularly resented representatives like Carter, who blended legal brilliance with unyielding confidence. He saw them as upstarts disrupting a system where seniority and connections dictated respect. What frustrated him most wasn't their policies but their refusal to defer to his status. They weren't impressed by his resume or intimidated by his reputation. They treated him as an equal, demanding he earn respect through the strength of his arguments, not his background. Jasmine Carter, the 33-year-old dynamo from Texas, had taken Washington by storm. A former civil rights attorney with a law degree, she'd spent years fighting for justice in courtrooms before bringing that same passion to Congress. Carter represented everything the establishment feared: young, brilliant, fearless, and unwilling to bow to those in power simply because of their tenure. Unlike the senator's privileged path, Carter earned her place through hard work. She worked her way through law school, built a successful practice defending the defenseless, and won her congressional seat by connecting with working families neglected by career politicians. Her legal practice focused on protecting constitutional rights, not corporate deals. She'd faced down prosecutors, corporate lawyers, and hostile judges, each victory sharpening her ability to dismantle those who underestimated her. Carter's journey to Congress was unconventional. While the senator used wealth and connections to launch his career, Carter built a grassroots movement rooted in her record of fighting for ordinary people. Voters supported her not for her name or wealth, but for her proven ability to protect their rights. Her combination of legal expertise and fearless advocacy made her a threat to establishment figures. She understood constitutional law better than most senators and had the courtroom, honed confidence to articulate it in hostile settings. Her years explaining complex legal concepts to juries made her adept at communicating sophisticated ideas accessibly. This clash wasn't just about two politicians disagreeing. It was about whether the old guard could silence a new generation through condescension. For the senator, it was about preserving a hierarchy where experience trumped expertise and seniority demanded respect regardless of qualifications. His attack was a desperate attempt to maintain a political culture where elite credentials mattered more than proven competence. For Carter, it was about proving that young lawmakers, especially women of color, deserved respect for their qualifications, not deference based on their place in the pecking order. Her response would show whether merit could triumph over privilege. The hearing room buzzed with tension. Staff, lobbyists, and journalists sensed the brewing conflict. The senator had planned his move, targeting someone he thought was vulnerable. Carter, however, was ready. She'd spent years preparing for such moments, not seeking confrontation, but knowing that backing down only emboldened bullies. The committee was discussing voting rights legislation when Carter delivered a precise legal analysis of recent court decisions, citing case law with the accuracy of a seasoned litigator. Her explanation of a lesser-known appeals court ruling impressed several committee members who took notes on her command of the material. That's when the senator struck. Representative Carter. He interrupted, cutting her off mid-sentence. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, I think this committee should hear from members with more substantial experience on these complex issues. The room stiffened. His tone wasn't just dismissive, it was patronizing, implying Carter's analysis was mere youthful zeal. Staffers exchanged glances, recognizing the kind of dismissal many feared when young lawmakers tackled serious issues. The interruption felt calculated to undermine Carter's authority before the committee and cameras. Carter paused, pen in hand, staring directly at the senator. Senator, I'd be happy to discuss my experience. Shall we start with my law degree or my years practicing constitutional law in federal court? Her measured response carried a sharp edge, signaling she wouldn't accept dismissal quietly. Democratic committee members perked up, sensing her challenge. The senator's smile was icy. I'm sure your credentials are impressive on paper, he said, but there's a difference between academic knowledge and the real-world experience gained from decades of public service. Some of us have been addressing these issues since before you were born. The phrase on paper cut deep, suggesting Carter's qualifications were theoretical. The age jab was worse, an irrelevant attempt to diminish her credibility. The insult lingered, dismissing her expertise and implying her youth disqualified her. Several committee members looked shocked at the disrespect. The senator, enjoying his perceived dominance, leaned back confidently. I've been involved in constitutional law for 30 years, he continued. I've advised presidents, worked with scholars, and shaped legislation affecting millions. The American people deserve to hear from representatives who understand the weight of these decisions. His emphasis on weight implied Carter couldn't grasp the gravity of the issues. His gestures addressed the room, not her specific points, reinforcing that she didn't belong at the table. Other Republicans nodded, sensing a chance to undermine a strong Democratic voice. Conservative staffers began typing, anticipating a talking point about respecting institutional wisdom. The senator had framed the moment as experience versus inexperience, but Carter sat calmly, making notes, her expression steady. The silence stretched after the senator's remarks, the room tense as others awaited her response. Are you finished, Senator? She asked, her voice professional but firm, because I'd like to address your concerns about my qualifications. Her tone suggested she was about to educate, not defend, a distinction the senator missed. He gestured grandly. Of course, Representative, the floor is yours, believing he'd already won. What he didn't know was that he'd walked into a trap Carter had spent her career preparing. The room fell silent as she organized her notes. Even the stenographer paused, sensing a pivotal moment. The senator, still smiling, was oblivious to the dismantling about to unfold. Carter looked up, her voice carrying the authority of a seasoned litigator. Senator, since you've questioned my experience, let me outline what qualifies me to discuss constitutional law. She opened a folder. You mentioned your 30 years. Let me share mine. I earned my law degree with honors, specializing in constitutional and civil rights law. Unlike some, I didn't just study it, I practiced it. For 8 years before Congress, I represented clients whose constitutional rights were violated by government overreach. The senator's smile faded. This wasn't the response he'd expected. I've argued constitutional cases in federal district court, appeals court, and before the Supreme Court, Carter continued. I've won landmark cases setting precedents for voting rights, due process, and equal protection, cases now taught in law schools. She held up a document. This is my Supreme Court brief from a case that overturned a discriminatory voting law affecting thousands. I wrote every word. How many Supreme Court briefs have you authored, Senator? The question hung unanswered. The senator opened his mouth, but Carter pressed on. You mentioned advising presidents. I've done better. I've fought for Americans whose rights were trampled by presidents. I've argued against DJ attorneys defending unconstitutional policies. She produced another document. This federal court decision cites my arguments to strike down an executive order violating First Amendment rights. The judge praised my constitutional analysis. I wasn't advising power, I was fighting it. The senator's face flushed. This wasn't the deference he expected. You mentioned scholars, Carter said, her voice stronger. I've been cited by them. Harvard Law Review published my 14th Amendment analysis. Yale Law Journal quoted my voting rights work. Scholars don't just work with me, they cite me. She reached for another folder. Before Congress, I was invited to teach constitutional law at 2 law schools. I declined because I was busy practicing it, defending real people's rights. The room was silent, the senator staring at her documents, clearly unprepared for this response. You spoke of the weight of decisions, Carter said, her voice sharp. I've held Americans' constitutional rights in my hands, arguing before judges for the freedoms that define this nation. I've protected voting rights for thousands, defended religious liberty for communities without a voice. When was the last time you argued a constitutional case, Senator? When did you write a brief defending someone's rights? When did you fight for the Constitution in court, not just in speeches? The senator was speechless, his confidence shattered. The difference between us, Carter said, is that you've spent 30 years discussing constitutional law in political arenas, winning through seniority and connections. I've spent a decade proving my expertise in courtrooms where judges care only about the law, not your name or connections. She gathered her documents. When you question my experience, you're dismissing my 8 years defending the Constitution, my Supreme Court cases, my established precedents, and the expertise that got me elected. The silence was deafening. The senator looked stunned, his arrogance replaced by embarrassment. Senator, Carter said calmly, if you'd like to continue discussing constitutional law, I'm ready. But let's base it on legal merit, not assumptions about who deserves respect based on tenure. The senator stared at his notes, his demeanor changed. I appreciate your clarification, Representative. He managed quietly. Carter wasn't done. One more thing, she said, pulling out a final document. This is a letter from the American Bar Association's Constitutional Law section, inviting me to serve on their executive committee, the youngest person ever invited, based on my litigation expertise. The legal community recognized my knowledge years before Congress. They cared about my track record, not my age or connections. The senator slumped, deflated. Now, Carter said, returning to her materials, shall I continue my analysis of the voting rights legislation, or do you have more questions about my qualifications? The aftermath was immediate. As the hearing recessed, smartphones lit up. Staffers, journalists, and observers shared the exchange, and clips went viral. Hashtags like #CarterDestroys and #ConstitutionalExpert trended within hours. The contrast between the senator's condescension and Carter's fact-based response captivated the public. The senator left without speaking to reporters, his staff dodging cameras. His office declined interviews, citing scheduling issues, a blow to a politician built on projecting competence. Democrats rallied around Carter. Senior lawmakers shared her response, with one senator tweeting, "This is what happens when expertise meets arrogance." Progressive groups hailed her as proof that young, qualified candidates could stand up to the establishment. Legal advocacy organizations celebrated her defense of her credentials. News outlets struggled to frame the story without making the senator look outmatched. Conservative media tried to call Carter disrespectful, but her substantive response was undeniable. Liberal outlets praised her as a symbol of merit over privilege. Legal experts confirmed Carter's credentials were exceptional, with professors noting she could teach constitutional law at top universities. Journalists verified her claims. Her Supreme Court brief, law review articles, and Bar Association invitation were all real and unprecedented for her age.